The forest was quiet, almost too quiet. Mist curled between the twisted trees, hiding shapes and shadows. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying a chill that made the skin crawl. Somewhere far above, the cliffs rose sharp against a gray sky. And on the highest point stood a fortress that seemed alive, as if it breathed with the storms. This was the home of the Alpha King, ruler of a pack feared across the lands. Tonight, the pack would witness a ceremony that had been spoken of in whispers for generations. The Alpha King would choose his mate. The lone figure moving through the forest did not belong to the pack. Cloaked in dark fabric, footsteps light but careful, the stranger entered the clearing where the ceremony was to be held. Her eyes, bright and alert, scanned the trees as though expecting them to move. She had traveled far to reach this place, drawn by forces she did not yet fully understand. Her heart raced not just from the journey, but from the strange pull she felt toward the fortress. Inside the fortress, the Alpha King paced in his chamber. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried the quiet power of one who ruled not just with strength, but with mind and will. His silver eyes reflected the lightning outside, sharp as blades. He had waited for the ceremony all year, for the moment when prophecy would finally be fulfilled. Yet tonight, something felt different. The gates opened, long and heavy. As the first of the pack arrived, their movements measured, their eyes watchful. They came to witness, to honor, and to judge. Among them was the chosen mate, a noble from the pack's inner circle, whose face was carefully calm. She had trained for this day her entire life, preparing to step into the Alpha King's world. But the stranger in the forest had no such training. She carried nothing but her own courage and a secret the pack could never guess. The moment she stepped into the clearing, the wind seemed to stop. Mist swirled around her boots, and the torches lining the stone circle flickered as if uncertain of her presence. Eyes turned. Whispers rose like small waves in the night. Who was she? Why was she here? The Alpha King's gaze fell upon her, and in that instant, time felt strange and heavy. He had never seen her before. Yet there was something in her posture, in the way she walked, that made him notice. Not fear, not arrogance. Something in between. Something that stirred curiosity and unease. She was not part of the pack, not part of the prophecy, or at least, she should not have been. And yet, here she was, standing at the edge of the ritual circle. The pack shifted nervously, whispering and glancing at one another. Tradition was strict. Only those selected by the Alpha King or by prophecy could be present. And yet, no one could stop her. She walked forward, confident, her steps steady, her eyes locked on the tall figure in the center of the clearing. The Alpha King's voice, low and commanding, cut through the silence. Who dares to step into my circle? Unbidden. The stranger did not flinch. Her voice was calm, though firm. I came because I was meant to see this. I came because I had to be here. A murmur ran through the pack. Murmurs of shock, of confusion, of disbelief. She had no right, and yet she had entered without fear. The Alpha King's brows knitted. His instincts told him she was dangerous, or perhaps necessary. There was a weight in her presence he could not explain, a force that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. You are not of this pack, he said, stepping closer. You know nothing of our traditions. One. I may not, she replied. But I know what must happen, and I am here to see it. Her eyes did not waver. I do not belong to you or your pack. Yet, I am here. The Alpha King stared at her, silent for a long moment. No one in the clearing had ever spoken like this, least of all to him. And yet, the stranger's words carried no disrespect, only certainty. The pack waited, tension thick in the night air. Very well, he said finally, his voice barely above a growl. You will stay. But know this one wrong step. And the forest will take you before I do. She bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect. I understand. The Alpha King signaled to the ceremonial guards. Torches flared brighter as they stepped aside, forming a path for the ritual. The chosen mate, the one destined by prophecy, looked at the stranger with a mixture of fear and anger. Her eyes narrowed. Who is she? She whispered, to no one in particular. How does she dare? The stranger did not answer. Instead, she focused on the circle where the ceremony would take place. The stones were etched with ancient runes, glowing faintly under the moonlight. It was a place of power, where generations of the pack had bound themselves to their alpha through blood and spirit. Tonight, that power would choose a new bond, or so the prophecy claimed. The Alpha King raised his hands, and the pack fell silent. The ceremony begins, he said. His voice echoed through the trees, carrying authority and command. We honor the bond that has been foretold. We call upon the spirits of the forest to witness our choice. The air thickened. Mist swirled faster, circling the stone runes like restless spirits. The Alpha King's eyes glowed faintly silver in the darkness, a sign of the power he wielded. He looked at the chosen mate, whose hands trembled slightly despite her training. Then, almost without thinking, his gaze flicked to the stranger. She met it without fear. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, a spark, a pull that neither fully understood. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them, even though hundreds of eyes were upon them. The ceremony proceeded. The Alpha King moved to the center of the circle, the chosen mate following close behind. Words of binding, of loyalty, of destiny, echoed through the clearing. But all the while, the stranger's presence hummed like a quiet storm at the edge of the ritual. Then it happened. A gust of wind, stronger than any natural breeze, swept through the clearing. Torches flickered wildly. The stone runes glowed brighter, and the ground trembled underfoot. The pack gasped and shifted uneasily. The chosen mate stumbled slightly, her voice faltering in the ritual words. The Alpha King's eyes widened, and he turned toward the stranger. What? He began. But the word died in his throat. The stranger stepped forward, almost as if drawn by the power of the circle itself. Without thinking, she placed a hand lightly on one of the glowing runes. The air pulsed with energy, a wave of power that rolled through the clearing like lightning. The Alpha King's breath caught. The pack froze. No one had ever touched the sacred runes during the ceremony. Some gasped, some whispered prayers, and the chosen mate, her eyes widened in shock and fear. The Alpha King strode forward, power and authority radiating from him like heat from fire. He stopped inches from the stranger, his silver eyes locked on hers. You... how? His voice was low, fierce, and tinged with disbelief. I do not know, she admitted softly. I did not plan this, but it felt necessary. Something called me here. A silence fell. The wind stilled. Even the mist seemed to hold its breath. The Alpha King's gaze softened, though only slightly, as though he recognized a truth he had not expected. He had ruled this pack for decades. He had faced rivals, curses, and the weight of prophecy itself. Yet the stranger, standing alone and unafraid, made him feel something he had not felt in years: uncertainty and desire. You are dangerous, he said finally. Not because of what you are, but because of what you might be. I do not wish danger, she replied, voice calm. Only to be here, to witness, to understand. The Alpha King took a slow breath. Behind him, the pack murmured, confused and anxious. The chosen mate stepped back slightly, unsure of what to do. And the stranger, she stood her ground, unafraid of the tension that pressed like stone around her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, without warning, the ritual circle pulsed once more, brighter than before. The runes burned like fire in the moonlight. The ground shook again. The forest seemed to close in. Something ancient, old as the pack itself, stirred in the shadows. The Alpha King's hand went instinctively to the hilt of his blade, though he did not draw it. His eyes never left the stranger. "Whatever you are," he said, voice barely audible, "this night is not over. You have stepped into a story that belongs to more than just you. And now, there is no turning back." The stranger nodded slowly. She did not yet understand everything that was happening, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life had changed forever. The pack watched in silence, hearts pounding. The prophecy had been interrupted. Tradition had been broken, and the Alpha King, feared and untouchable, had just faced something or someone he could not control. As the wind howled through the forest and the mist rose higher, the stranger's eyes met the Alpha King's once more. In them, there was recognition. In them, there was challenge. In them, there was the quiet promise of something powerful yet unknown. And in that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Because no one, not the pack, not the chosen mate, not even the Alpha King himself could predict what would come next. The ceremony, the prophecy, the power of the pack, it all waited, and the stranger had just stepped into the center of it. The storm had passed, leaving the forest wet and heavy with mist. The clearing where the ceremony had nearly spiraled into chaos now seemed quieter, but the tension remained. The Alpha King had returned to his fortress, the stranger still by his side. No one fully understood why she had survived the night, why she had touched the sacred runes without harm. Even the Alpha King did not know. Yet one thing was certain: the presence of the outsider had unsettled the balance of the pack. Inside the fortress, the walls were carved from stone and wood, old as the mountains themselves. The air smelled of moss, rain, and iron, and faint shadows moved along the corridors as though the structure itself were alive. The Alpha King led the stranger through these halls, his gaze cautious and sharp. His silver eyes seemed to see more than her form. They measured her heart, her strength, her intent. "You have disrupted everything," he said, voice low and commanding. "The pack may never forgive this intrusion." "I do not seek forgiveness," she replied calmly. "I only came because I was called. Because I felt I had to." He stopped and turned to face her. His presence was like the weight of the mountains, solid, impossible to ignore. "Called? By whom? By what?" She shook her head. "I do not know. Only that something greater than me led me here. And I think it wanted me to be here with you." The Alpha King narrowed his eyes, studying her closely. No one had ever spoken to him like this. Usually, people bowed, whispered, or ran. Fear was the language of the pack. But she spoke with honesty, with quiet strength, and it unsettled him more than any threat could. "You are not safe here," he said finally. "Not for yourself, and not for the pack. There are forces at work you cannot yet understand. I cannot protect you from everything, but I will not let you die in my halls tonight." She tilted her head slightly. "I do not wish to be protected. I wish to understand." And so, reluctantly, he led her deeper into the fortress. Rooms opened into libraries filled with scrolls and tomes, their spines etched with runes older than any living memory. Hallways twisted like the roots of the forest itself. And the air seemed charged with ancient energy. For hours, they walked in silence, until the Alpha King brought her to a chamber lit by moonlight streaming through high windows. The room smelled of cedar and cold stone. Outside, the forest rustled, alive with unseen eyes. "You will stay here for now," he said. Tomorrow, you will follow the trials of the pack. If you are to remain in my presence, you must prove your courage, your mind, and your loyalty." She nodded, accepting the challenge. "I am ready." For a moment, he studied her. And then he walked to the window, looking out over the cliffs and the dark forest below. "Courage is not enough. You must understand the power you have stepped into. This pack, it is not ordinary. We are bound by forces older than men, older than the mountains. You have touched them tonight. You have stirred them." "I can feel it," she admitted softly. "Something moved when I touched the runes. Something awakened." The Alpha King turned sharply, his silver eyes searching hers. "You are not lying?" "Two. No," she said. "I do not lie. Not about this." He let out a slow breath, half a growl, half a sigh. Then, "We are linked, now. You and I. Whether you wish it or not, this bond cannot be broken. Something ancient has chosen it." The words hung in the air like smoke. She did not fully understand their meaning, but the weight of them settled in her chest. Her life had already changed beyond recognition, and now she realized she was part of something far larger than herself. The next day, the trials began. The Alpha King brought her to the edge of the forest, where the terrain was rough, the cliffs jagged, and the trees knotted like the bones of the earth. Wolves, not all of them human, watched from the shadows. Some were curious, some were hostile. All were waiting to see if she would survive. The first trial was simple, yet dangerous. Traverse the cliffside path while the forest tested her with illusions. Shadows leapt from the trees. Whispers of warning echoed in the wind, and the ground seemed ready to crumble beneath her feet. She faltered once, but caught herself, refusing to yield to fear. The Alpha King followed silently, his presence both comforting and intimidating. When she glanced at him, he gave no praise, no smile, only a sharp glance that seemed to say, "You must endure." By the time she reached the top of the cliff, soaked by rain and sweat, she understood the truth of the Alpha King's world. Strength alone was not enough. Wisdom, courage, and the ability to remain calm in the face of unknown danger were what mattered most. The second trial was even more delicate. The Alpha King summoned illusions of her fears, visions of failure, of harm, of betrayal. They moved like living shadows around her, whispering lies and threats. Her heart hammered, and her mind screamed to run. Yet she did not. She faced each illusion, naming it, confronting it, refusing to let it control her. The Alpha King observed silently, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. But deep inside, he felt something stir, a grudging respect, a curiosity he had not allowed himself in years. Few had ever endured the trials, and fewer still had done so with grace under pressure. By the end of the day, she had passed both trials. Exhausted, she collapsed to the forest floor, the mist wrapping around her like a protective cloak. The Alpha King approached, kneeling beside her. "You surprised me," he said quietly. "Most fail by now. Most give in to fear. You endured." She looked up at him, her eyes meeting his silver gaze. For a moment, the air between them felt alive, almost electric. Neither spoke, neither moved. Only the wind and the forest filled the silence. "Do not mistake this for trust," he said finally, standing and walking away. "You have proven strength, but trust, that is something earned over time." She nodded, understanding. Yet she could not ignore the strange pull she felt toward him. The curiosity, the tension, the unspoken bond that seemed to draw them closer with every passing moment. Night fell again, and the fortress took on a different mood. Shadows grew longer. The walls seemed to breathe, and the forest hummed with energy. The Alpha King returned to the chamber, where she was resting. He watched her sleep for a moment, seeing the exhaustion and determination etched on her face. She stirred, waking to his silent presence. "I could not sleep," she admitted. "Neither could I," he said. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "There is much you do not understand. The pack, the prophecy, and even I have not faced what you have brought here." Her eyes searched his. "Then teach me. Help me understand." He studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out, not touching, but close enough that the air between them seemed charged. "Understanding comes through experience," he said. "Through risk, through trial, through choice. And you will be tested in ways neither of us can predict." The tension between them was palpable. She felt it in her chest, in her limbs, in the very air she breathed. He was both danger and protection, authority and enigma, and she could not look away. "Do you fear me?" she asked softly. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked out the window toward the forest, where shadows moved like living things. "I do not fear you," he said finally, "but I do not know what you will become. And that frightens me more than any enemy." For the first time, she saw a crack in his armor, a glimpse of the man behind the crown and the power. A man who had carried burdens, who had faced enemies, who had ruled with iron and will, and now faced something he could not control. The night stretched long. Words were few, but the silence between them spoke volumes. Each glance, each gesture, carried unspoken questions and answers. The bond that had begun at the ceremony deepened, not yet fully understood, but undeniable. Days passed. The stranger learned the ways of the pack, trained in skills she had never imagined she would need. She discovered a strength within herself, a connection to the forest and to the power the Alpha King wielded. And with every step, every trial, every whispered exchange in shadowed halls or moonlit clearings, the tension between them grew quiet, slow burning, electric. The Alpha King found himself watching her more than he should, seeing how she faced danger, how she endured, how she questioned and learned. And sometimes, when the moonlight fell on her hair, or when she laughed quietly at something small and human, he felt something he had long buried stir within him. Something softer, something dangerous, something he could not yet name. But the pack remained tense. Whispers followed them everywhere. Rivals eyed the stranger with suspicion. The chosen mate looked at her with growing resentment. And in the shadows, something waited, a force older than the Alpha King, something that had been awakened when she first touched the sacred runes. The forest was alive with tension. Mist clung to the trees, swirling in thick sheets that hid the shapes moving within. The stranger's heart pounded as she faced the creature that had emerged from the shadows, the ancient force awakened when she had first touched the sacred runes. Its eyes glowed like fire, and its growl rolled across the clearing, low and threatening. Every instinct screamed for her to flee, but she did not move. Instead, she closed her eyes for a moment, reaching inside herself for the power she had only begun to understand. The connection she shared with the Alpha King thrummed within her, a pull of energy, of bond, of something older than fear. She had survived trials before, faced illusions and dangers meant to break her spirit, but this was unlike anything she had ever encountered. Behind her, a rustle in the trees told her he had arrived. The Alpha King stepped into the clearing, his silver eyes burning brighter than ever. He did not shout, he did not command, he simply stood there, a figure of authority and raw power. "You are not alone," he said quietly, his voice carrying through the mist like a promise. "Do not face it alone." She opened her eyes and met his gaze. For a moment, the tension between them, danger, respect, and something more unspoken, filled the clearing. Then, with a sudden surge of courage, she raised her hands, summoning the energy that had awakened inside her. the same energy that had startled the pack during the ceremony. The creature lunged, shadows twisted around its body, and it moved faster than the eye could follow. But she did not retreat. With the Alpha King by her side, she focused, calling upon the bond between them. A wave of power pulsed from her, and the creature stumbled, caught off guard by the strength of their combined presence. The Alpha King stepped forward, his hand touching hers. Silver light radiated from their joined hands, a force neither fully understood, but felt deeply. The creature growled, recoiling, then circled, testing them. Its eyes glowed brighter, and the ground trembled beneath it. "You are stronger than I thought," the Alpha King said, voice low, almost a whisper only she could hear, "and braver. But strength alone will not be enough." "I am ready," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I will not run." Together, they faced the creature. Energy crackled through the air like lightning. The Alpha King's silver eyes met hers, and in that instant, words were not needed. Trust, strength, bond. Everything they had built over days of trials, moments of quiet understanding, and shared danger flowed between them. With a roar, the creature attacked. The stranger and the Alpha King moved in perfect harmony, anticipating each movement, each strike. Shadows twisted and writhed, but they did not falter. Light and energy radiated from them, a force that seemed older than the forest itself. Finally, the creature let out a long, echoing cry. It backed away, shrinking into the mist, its power quelled by the combined force of the bond between the stranger and the Alpha King. The forest fell silent. Mist drifted gently across the clearing, and the night seemed to hold its breath. The Alpha King looked at her, his silver eyes softer now, carrying something more than authority, something personal, something tender. "You have done what none could before," he said. "You have faced what was thought impossible, and yet you stand, not broken, not afraid. That is rare." She smiled faintly, exhausted but exhilarated. "I was not alone," she said. "You were here. You were with me." He nodded, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "And I will always be. This bond, it is more than prophecy. It is choice. And that choice is ours." For the first time, the stranger felt the weight of her journey lift. She had entered the forest a stranger, untested, unsure of her place. Now, she stood as part of something greater, a force intertwined with the Alpha King, tied not just by destiny, but by courage, trust, and recognition of each other's strength. The dawn began to break, casting golden light across the forest. The pack, which had watched the clearing from the edges, began to stir. Whispers moved like wind through the trees. News of the stranger's bravery, of the Alpha King's reaction, of the power they had wielded together. No one spoke openly, but the respect in their eyes was undeniable. Even the chosen mate, who had once stood ready to be bound to the Alpha King by tradition alone, now regarded the stranger differently, not with fear, not with envy, but with recognition. The bond they had formed had shifted the world of the pack in ways no prophecy could have predicted. The Alpha King and the stranger returned to the fortress together. The corridors seemed lighter now, as if the walls themselves acknowledged the change. The power that had once been rigid, harsh, and controlled was now tempered by something softer, yet no less strong, a force of understanding, connection, and respect. In the chamber where she had first rested, the stranger finally allowed herself to breathe fully. Exhaustion pulled at her limbs, but her heart felt full in a way it never had before. The Alpha King watched her, silent, from across the room. Neither needed to speak. Their bond had been tested, proven, and strengthened. Words were unnecessary when action and trust had done what language could not. As days passed, their relationship deepened not through words, but through shared moments, training, and quiet understanding. They moved together through the pack, navigating challenges, defending the forest, and ensuring that the ancient forces remained in balance. The stranger learned the ways of the pack, discovering skills she never imagined she would need. She learned the history, the rituals, and the responsibility that came with being part of this powerful world. And the Alpha King, he began to change too. Not in his authority, not in his strength, but in his heart. The walls he had built around himself began to crumble, not from weakness, but from trust and recognition of the stranger's courage and wisdom. She had not only survived the trials, she had shown him what loyalty and bravery truly meant. Together, they faced smaller threats, rival packs, and disturbances in the forest. Each challenge brought them closer, their trust and connection deepening. The pack, once uneasy with the stranger's presence, now saw her as an integral part of their world. The final test came unexpectedly. From the shadows of the forest, a rival leader, older and crueler than any before, sought to challenge the Alpha King's authority. The rival had waited for weakness, for hesitation, for a moment when the king's heart might falter. But the stranger and the Alpha King stood united. The rival approached the clearing, eyes sharp, teeth bared, and power radiating like fire. The Alpha King stepped forward, tall, unyielding, silver eyes glowing. The stranger was at his side, her energy now fully awakened, her courage steady. Together, they faced the rival and his forces, not with violence alone, but with strategy, trust, and the strength of their bond. The battle was swift but decisive. Shadows clashed, energy surged, and the forest itself seemed to respond to the will of the bonded pair. When it was over, the rival was defeated, not destroyed, but humbled, forced to acknowledge the power and unity of the Alpha King and the stranger. The pack watched in awe, the forest finally still. That night, under a sky heavy with stars, the stranger and the Alpha King stood side by side. The forest was calm, the mist low, and the air carried the faint scent of rain and moss. They looked at each other, unspoken understanding passing between them. "You have changed everything," the Alpha King said softly. "Not only the pack, not only the prophecy, but me." "And you have changed me," she replied. "I came here knowing nothing. And now, I understand. I am part of this world, part of you, part of something greater." For the first time, the Alpha King allowed himself a small, genuine smile. "Then we face the future together," he said. "Whatever comes, whatever challenges rise, we face it side by side. Not by prophecy, not by obligation, but by choice." The stranger nodded, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly at home. The forest, the pack, the Alpha King, they were no longer distant forces or impossible mysteries. They were her world. And as dawn broke fully, casting golden light across the cliffs and the forest, the bond between them was undeniable. Not born of tradition, not imposed by prophecy, but forged in trials, danger, trust, and understanding. They had faced darkness together, and now they had the strength to face anything. The forest whispered around them, alive and watchful. The ancient forces had not disappeared, but they had found balance. And in the quiet, the stranger and the Alpha King shared a glance that carried the promise of many days to come. A future built not on fear, but on courage, trust, and choice. The night's shadows had faded. The bond remained, and the pack, once hesitant and wary, now followed them with respect, awe, and loyalty. The stranger had arrived as an outsider. She had touched forbidden power, challenged prophecy, and survived where others might have fallen. But now, she was more than that. She was a force of her own, a partner to the Alpha King, and a beacon of courage for the pack. Together, they faced the dawn, ready for whatever the future might bring. Knowing that whatever challenges arose, they would meet them not alone, but as one.